This is Dr. Carroll, and this video is about Java for loops. So we've already learned about loops with while loops, and so why should we have a for loop? Well, if you already know how many times you're going to iterate, then you should use a while loop. So let's look at the syntax for this kind of loop. First, you have the keyword for, then you have to have parentheses, unlike Python, and then just go ahead and use the brackets. They're not technically required, but just go ahead and use them, okay? And then the first part in the for header there in the parentheses is we're going to have an initialization statement. So even if you've initialized a variable outside of the for loop because you want to use that variable after the for loop, then it's still good practice to go ahead and re-initialize that variable in case this code is copy and pasted somewhere else. Now, if you declare a variable inside the for loop in the parentheses there, then its scope is strictly the for loop. So that's an interesting divergence from a while loop. The second part of the for loop here we have is what I call the continuation criterion. It is, again, a Boolean expression that when it evaluates to true, we go into the body of the loop. And then to complete the header here, we have an update, which is typically an increment operator, which we'll talk about in just a second. So inside the for loop, we have a statement or statements, and this makes up the loop body. And there we go. There's the syntax for a for loop in Java. Java also has an auto for loop, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So let's talk more about the update, as the update is typically increment or decrement operator. So if we have j equals plus plus I, that is an example of the increment operator, but so is I plus plus. And so these have different names. And so here's the decrement operator and the decrement operator. Any confusion? Well, let's give them the names. So this is pre-increment when it happens before the variable, and this is post-increment when it happens after the variable. Don't put spaces between your variable names and the increment or decrement. And then pre-decrement and post-decrement. So now you might be saying, that's great. Why do we have two for each? Well, because there's some nuances that are different. For example, pre-increment is similar to incrementing the variable and then assigning it. Oh, that j equals 1 should be I. Sorry about that. And but the post increment uses the variable. Notice it's I equals I in pre-increment and I equals I plus 1 in the pre-increment, and j equals I in the post-increment is the first thing that happens, then it is updated. And so it uses it in the post-increment and then updates it. The exact same setup is true for decrement. In decrementing, it decreases the variable and then uses it, whereas in post-decrement, it uses the variable and then increments it. And so you're maybe wondering, which of these two should I use? Well, the pre-increment, in my opinion, is easier to use because it doesn't have these side effects that are less intuitive. Let's see an example here. Okay, so let's switch to countdown. So here we have a countdown as a while loop. And so let's go ahead and change this while loop. Let me give you a second. Let's review this. So we initialize here this counter. We have our continuation criterion right here. We have our statements here, and notice this one is a decrement, a pre-decrement, and so we'll use this as an update. So to convert this, we need the keyword for, and then we need our parentheses, And then the next part is the continuation criterion, and we just pull that from the while loop, and then we get the update. There we have the update. Now let's finish off the parentheses and the braces, which wrap to the next line, sorry. And then the body's the same. You pull out the update from the loop body, and then the body's basically going to be the same. And there we have it. There is our for loop version of Countdown. Notice everything else stay the same. Now there is one difference here in that Counter now has a scope of only the for loop, so you cannot use it after the for loop. And that, to me, is advantageous because we don't want it to have side effects. And so it's just a temporary variable. It's just the loop counter. It's nothing more than that. If you need it more than that, you can declare it before the for loop, which will then increase its scope to be available after the for loop. Let me show both of these side by side here. We have the while loop and then the for loop. Now let's talk about the execution order of what happens, just to be clear. So the very first thing that happens with a for loop is what? Well, for is just a keyword, and so the first thing is the initialization. The next thing that happens is our continuation criteria. In this case, counter greater than or equal to 0. Now, if this is false, we never enter the loop body. You do not have to enter the loop body on a for loop. And so, because your continuation criterion could be false. Now, that's not often the case, but sometimes it is. And so then what's next? It's not update, it's the loop body. And so now we're in the first iteration. So we're printing out the body, and it'll display 10. And then we do our update, which is a pre-decrement. And then what do we do next? Then we check the continuation criterion. And so that completes the first iteration. Now we start the second iteration. We do the loop body, in this case just one statement. We do our update, and then we check our continuation criterion. Now I've spaced them out to illustrate that you always will do these three things. If you execute the loop body, you will do the update, and then you'll do the continuation criterion, so long as you don't have a break statement in there. And so we can go through this, or let me just do several at once. Now we jump down to where we display 1. Okay, so counter is 1. We decrement counter. What's the value of counter now? It's 0. We check our continuation criterion. 0 greater than or equal to 0 is true. So we go into the loop body again. We display 0. We decrement. Then are we done? No. We check that continuation criterion one more time, and we will always check it until it's false. And then what do? We jump after the loop and we're done. But notice we do check that continuation criterion one last time. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it.